in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My husband cheated on me with his own cousin for 2 years, but instant karma destroyed his life when I exposed the truth to his religious parents. Hello, everyone. My name is Eva. I'm 30 years old, and today I want to share the story of how my life took an unexpected turn. About a week ago, my husband Roderick, 32, went out on one of his regular business trips. As a sales executive, these weekly trips were part of our routine. This time he told me he was going to Jalfur, Connecticut. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, so I didn't think much of it. However, 3 days ago, I received a call from my friend Miranda, who lives in Los Angeles. She was in a local bar when she bumped into my husband. Yes, Roderick, who was supposed to be in Connecticut, not California. She saw him with another woman. When Miranda confronted him, he said she was a colleague and they were there on business. But immediately after this encounter, they hurried out of the bar as if they had been caught doing something wrong. Miranda called me straight away. "Hey, Eva, I've just seen Roderick in Los Angeles with another woman." I asked her if she was sure, if maybe she had seen someone who looked like him. But no, she was completely sure. She had even taken a photo. The image wasn't the best quality. It was a bit blurry and you couldn't make out the woman's face very well, but you could see Roderick perfectly. It was definitely my husband, who had told me he was in Connecticut. I reacted immediately. I didn't want to think about it too much. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe his work had sent him to Los Angeles at the last minute. But if that were the case, why didn't he tell me that very night? Roderick called me later. His voice sounded normal, as if everything was in order. Then, as if it were an insignificant detail, he casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I ran into Miranda in Los Angeles." I immediately asked him, "What are you doing in Los Angeles?" And then the justifications began. He said, "Oh, yes. Well, there was a sudden change of plans. My boss sent me here at the last minute. I was so busy that I didn't have time to let you know." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something didn't add up in this whole situation. His words seemed rehearsed, as if he were reciting a script he had carefully prepared before calling me to sound convincing. Then I remembered something. A few weeks ago, I had made another business trip to Bryper, Connecticut. I didn't think anything of it at the time either, but now I had an unsettling feeling. So I did something I wouldn't normally do. I checked our credit card statements, and what I found left me frozen. I had made purchases in Los Angeles during that same week. He had been lying to me, not just this time, but at least once before. This confirmed to me that it wasn't just a work trip. He wasn't in Los Angeles by chance. He had gone to see that woman, the same person, on 2 different occasions. Looking further back, I discovered that almost half the time he said he was on business trips in Connecticut, he was actually in Los Angeles. This pattern had been repeated for almost 8 months. Sleeping that night seemed like an impossible task with all this information going around in my head. I kept looking at my phone, checking our credit card transactions, looking for more evidence. I examined his social networks, his emails, at least the ones I could access, his work calendar. I didn't even know exactly what I was looking for at that moment. Probably more confirmation, more pain. And then, as my world felt crashing down around me, I remembered another important detail. Roderick had disabled the option to share his location. He never does that. We always share our locations with each other, not for control, but for safety. If he is traveling, I like to see if he has landed safely. If I go out late, he likes to make sure I got home safely. But I had deactivated this function, and I hadn't realized it until now. I didn't know what to do. My mind was working at full speed. Roderick would be back in just 2 days, and I felt that I was running out of time to make a decision. The only thing I was clear about was that I didn't want to be there when he came back. I wasn't going to stay to listen to another made-up excuse or his empty apologies. So I did the only thing that seemed sensible. I packed all my belongings, literally everything that belonged to me, and made a decision. I went straight to my parents' house, which fortunately was only half an hour away. I needed to take refuge there for a while, surrounded by people who could protect me from this whole situation. However, before leaving, I wanted to make sure that he couldn't deny what I had done. I printed out our credit card statements, all the ones showing charges in Los Angeles, and highlighted the important information. I also printed out that blurry photo that Miranda had taken. It wasn't very clear, but I was sure he would recognize it perfectly. The image of that woman was still quite clear in my memory. And I can't blame Miranda for the quality of the photo. She was some distance away when she took it. I left all this evidence on the dining room table, just sitting there like a time bomb. I didn't even leave a note. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I would have written anyway. Maybe something like, "Hey, I know you're a liar and you've betrayed me. I'm leaving. I left you last night's leftovers in the fridge." Yesterday, Roderick returned from his trip and started calling me incessantly. He must have tried to contact me at least 10 times in the first few hours. Honestly, I found it pretty pathetic. After everything that had happened, did he really think I would answer the phone as if nothing had happened? I wasn't going to answer. I didn't even want to hear his voice. I turned off my phone for a while just to have some peace and quiet. I knew he was probably panicking, but honestly, I didn't care at all. I needed time to breathe, to think, to stop feeling like I was drowning in this mess. I keep reflecting on all the time I spent with him. I was so sure of our marriage, and now I feel like I don't even know the person I married. He's been my husband for 5 years, and I never thought he was capable of something like this. But I guess that's what all the people who suffer infidelity think. My mother is advising me that I should at least listen to him once, if only to get some closure. Should I take his call? Should I allow him to explain himself, or should I simply keep my distance and be firm in my decision? Update 1. My attempts to avoid Roderick didn't last as long as I expected, and I'm surprised they lasted at all. A day after posting my last update, he showed up at my parents' door. I thought he would respect my space and wait for me to contact him, but he didn't. He stood there, looking like he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and flatly refused to leave until I listened to him. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to listen to what he had to say, but he insisted that he needed to explain himself. I refused to let him in and told him to speak to me from the doorway. I was prepared for the same lies, the same manipulations, but what he revealed to me left me completely stunned. He began by telling me that this whole problem had started a year ago during one of his work conferences. Apparently, he met this woman there, a colleague or something similar, and they exchanged phone numbers. He said they started talking, casually at first, but as time went on, the conversations became more personal. He said they stayed in touch after the conference, and that's when things escalated. He went on to say that he didn't even realize when he crossed the line. He talked about all this as if it were a simple, innocent mistake, as if one thing had led to another through no real fault of his, or as if that made his behavior any less serious. But we are talking about an adult capable of making his own decisions, and those decisions led him to this moment. He tried to convince me that it was only physical, that there was nothing deeper. He kept repeating that he had already ended it with her, and that he had done so on the same day that Miranda sent me the photo. That would be too big a coincidence, one that I definitely wasn't going to believe. I replied, "First of all, this doesn't make things any better. Not in the slightest. You've been lying to me for a year, Roderick. And you would have continued to do so if Miranda hadn't seen you, so save all your excuses. And secondly, do you expect me to believe that you have been traveling to Los Angeles every month just for a physical encounter? How long do you think I'm going to accept that story? It was one thing to have been unfaithful all these months, but it was quite another to be treated like I was stupid and to keep making up excuses that would get us nowhere. I made it clear to him that there was no going back. I didn't care if he was sorry, if he felt bad. If one thing led to another, that was no longer important. Just as one situation led to another, and he ended up with this woman, one thing led to another, and now I was going to ask him for a divorce. I said to him without hesitation, "You will soon be hearing from my divorce lawyer." After hearing that word, he began to cry in front of my door, but I informed him that visiting time was over and that it was a good time for him to leave. He had already said everything he had to say, which didn't matter much to me, so as far as I was concerned, our relationship was over. Now I just need to find a divorce lawyer, as I certainly don't have one because I've never needed one before. You could say that I lied to Roderick, but it will only be for a few days until I find a suitable professional to handle my case. Update 2. So much has happened in the last month that I haven't had the time or the mental energy to sit down and write here. But I think you too will feel overwhelmed when you finish reading this update. I will try not to go on too long, but I want to share as many details as possible. I was working with my lawyer, whom I had finally hired, analyzing the next steps, when I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lillian, Roderick's cousin, a woman of about 35. I knew her. We weren't particularly close, but we had met each other enough times for her call not to surprise me. Although I didn't have her number saved, which reflects how little we were related. As soon as I answered, she got straight to the point. She told me that Roderick was really depressed and that she had gone to his house to console him because he was devastated by everything that had happened. Really? I understand that he is her family, but was she really calling me to make me feel sorry for him after everything he had done? After lying to me directly, deceiving me, and then trying to minimize it as if it were an insignificant mistake. I was almost amused at how absurd it all was, but instead of losing my composure, I took a deep breath and asked her, "And that should matter to me?" She paused, as if waiting for me to say something more. When I didn't, she went on to say that Roderick deeply regretted everything and that he was completely lost without me, that he cried constantly because he couldn't believe what he had done. At that moment, I sat with the phone to my ear, completely perplexed by what I was hearing. Of course, maybe he was crying. Maybe he was sorry, but what did she expect me to do with that information? Give him another chance because now he was crying his eyes out? I said, "Lillian, I understand that he's going through a bad time, but he made his own decisions. He chose to lie, he chose to be unfaithful, and now he must face the consequences." She was silent for a second, and I thought maybe that would be the end of the conversation. But it wasn't. Then she started saying that she didn't realize how many difficulties Roderick and I had been facing, that relationships have ups and downs, and that marriage is not always perfect. My God, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had to close my eyes and count to 5 so as not to lose control. I took another deep breath and said to her directly, "Lillian, this is not something I can get over. It's not a simple misunderstanding. I can't trust him again, and that destroys any possibility of reconciliation." After that, I hung up because there was nothing more to say. I don't know if she understood my position or not, but I didn't want to listen to her arguments anymore. Let me make something clear. I never hang up on people. I hate doing it. But at that moment, I knew that if I stayed on the phone any longer I would start shouting, and I wasn't going to give her or Roderick that satisfaction. However, I did wonder why her cousin, of all people, would call me to try to sort out Roderick's problems. Perhaps she was expecting it from her parents, who had remained completely silent, from a friend, or anyone else. I thought about it for several days until it occurred to me to check the security cameras at home on my phone. I started looking at recordings from several weeks ago until I found something shocking. And there they were, in my backyard, kissing passionately. Roderick and Lillian. It made me feel immediately repulsed. I mean, they're not brothers, but they're still cousins. I felt nauseous. I really thought I had hit rock bottom with this whole situation, but apparently there was still room to fall deeper. I cannot find the words to describe how absolutely disgusted I felt at that moment. My whole body shakes, just remembering it now. I was looking at the screen, watching my husband kissing his own cousin in the backyard of our house. I think I stood there, staring at the screen, for a full 10 minutes. It was like a self-defense mechanism where my brain refused to process what I was seeing. How was it possible? There had to be some logical explanation, right? Maybe I was so emotionally exhausted that I was misinterpreting the images. Maybe I was hallucinating. I enlarged the image, rewound the recording, reviewed it over and over again. But no, there was no way I could be mistaken. There was no possible misinterpretation. There was no other explanation. Roderick and Lillian were in my backyard, kissing intensely. I felt physically sick. And I'm not exaggerating, I had to run to the bathroom because I thought I was going to throw up. I didn't end up doing it, but it took me a while to calm down enough to think clearly. Even so, maybe my mind wasn't completely clear, but I did the only thing I could think of. I immediately sent Miranda a message asking her to confirm something for me. This is very, very important. I sent her a photo of Lillian and asked her if she was the woman I had seen with Roderick in the bar. It took Miranda a few minutes to reply, which seemed like an eternity. I was in front of the phone watching what she was typing, but the message didn't come. Finally, she replied that yes, she was the woman I had seen in the bar and asked me how I had got the photo and a few other things. That's why it took her so long to reply, although it was probably less than a minute. I explained who I was, that Lillian was her cousin. Miranda's response was exactly what I was thinking and what anyone would think. What the hell? At that moment, I was wandering around my parents' house, trying to process what I was supposed to do with this information. Infidelity is serious. Lying is something else. But being unfaithful to your own cousin? That represents a completely different level of disgusting behavior for which I was not prepared. How was I supposed to justify the divorce now, as infidelity with a family member? I couldn't keep this to myself. I went straight to our house and started banging on the door. When I arrived, it was Lillian who opened it. The audacity of this woman. I saw the guilt on her face, but she still had the nerve to act surprised to see me there, as if she didn't know exactly why I had come. Clearly, I was just an unwelcome guest, interrupting her romantic evening with a married man with whom she apparently had an intimate relationship. For a second, she simply stood there, frozen. I pulled her aside and went straight in. Roderick was in the kitchen, by the bar, with a glass of whiskey in his hand, as if he were relaxing after having shared who knows what moments with his cousin. When he saw me, his whole body tensed. He no longer seemed so calm, and in that moment I knew. I knew that he had been waiting for this moment. I knew that he would eventually discover the truth, but he had hoped to have more time to come up with some ridiculous excuse. I told him that I knew everything. I told him that I knew that Lillian was the woman he had been cheating on me with. Of course, he tried to deny it, because that was his first reaction. He laughed, as if I were deranged, as if I were making baseless accusations. I could see him searching for the right words, something that could explain the whole situation. But then I took out my phone, opened the security video and showed it to him. Now he couldn't justify giving her mouth-to-mouth in the playground with her standing right there. And that's when the whole, disgusting, horrible truth came out. This wasn't just a recent affair. It wasn't a mistake made in a moment of weakness. No, this had started long before we met years ago. He and Lillian had been romantically involved long before I came on the scene. But apparently they ended their relationship when we got married. And then, 2 years ago, they picked up where they left off. 2 whole years. 2 years of my life wasted on a man who had been having an affair with his own cousin. I was ready to throw up, even. I felt physically sick. I simply waited for him to finish his explanation, turned around and left. It has taken me several days to write all this down, because every time I started I was overcome with such a feeling of revulsion that I didn't know if I could continue. On one occasion, I even almost threw up on the floor. I don't know how many people are aware of this situation, and I'm not sure whether I should share it or not. This is part of the reason why I gather the courage to write something that disgusts me so much, to find out what your opinions are on the matter. Update 3. This update comes less than a month later, but it has been an intense 2 weeks that bring me here with a lot to share. After confronting Roderick, I felt extremely enraged, so angry that I couldn't sit still. I wasn't even sure what I should do next, but one thing was clear. I wanted to do something that would make him feel even a fraction of what I was experiencing. Revenge, I guess. It sounds drastic, but at the time, I felt like I needed some kind of justice. Instead of sitting around letting my mind wander, I just got in my car and drove to his parents' house. I'm not proud of it, but at the time I felt they deserved to know the truth. Roderick's parents live about 2 hours away, so by the time I arrived it was around 7 in the evening. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say to them. I mean, how do you explain something like that? How do you tell people who have treated you like part of their family for years that their son has been having intimate relationships with his cousin? I realized that they had no idea what was going on. They knew that Roderick and I were taking some time apart, but that was all. I guess they thought it was just one of those difficult stages, not that our marriage was definitely over. They welcomed me with a warm hug when they let me in. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I simply stated it bluntly. I told them we were getting a divorce. They asked me what had happened, visibly surprised by my statement, as Roderick hadn't mentioned anything to them. I don't know if I could explain it any other way. I told them absolutely everything. About the infidelity, about the video of Roderick and Lillian, about how I found out, how I confronted him. The whole story in a nutshell. I showed them the video, and the look on their faces when they saw it was enough to break anyone's heart. Their mother started crying almost immediately. I'm sure she felt as betrayed as I did, How could she not? Her son was on the video with her niece, betraying his wife. His father remained silent, which I guess was his way of processing everything. I know he was deeply disappointed. I saw it in his eyes, but he didn't say a word at first. He just looked at his wife, then at me, and then back at the video. His mother, on the other hand, was already asking how she could help me. She told me that she was very sorry for what was happening, that none of this was my fault, and that no matter what happened, I would always be part of their family. It was at that moment that I realized how much I was going to miss them. They had been extremely kind to me, and it was certain that the divorce would distance us. I told them that I wanted to keep in touch with them, that I didn't want to cut ties completely, regardless of what happened with Roderick. I wasn't angry with them. This wasn't their responsibility. We talked for a while longer. They kept asking questions. They wanted to understand how long this whole thing had been going on and all the related details. After leaving Roderick's parents' house, I didn't know what to expect. I thought that maybe they would try to intervene in some way, or at least offer me some kind of closure. But as the days went by, I received no communication from them. I did, however, receive news from Roderick's sister. Roderick's parents are very religious people, and I knew that if anyone was going to be truly outraged by what had happened, it would be them. They have always been very strict about family values. Then yesterday I got a call from Roderick's sister. She wanted to meet and talk to me. Honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but I agreed. I wasn't expecting any great revelations, but I was curious to hear what she had to say. When we met, he told me that after everything that had happened, the family had had a very serious conversation with Roderick. It turns out that his parents were absolutely furious once they got over the initial shock, and they began to reflect seriously on the situation, especially with regard to Lillian. He told me that they couldn't believe it, that it went against all the principles they stood for. They had tried to make him understand the seriousness of the matter, but he had flatly refused to end his relationship with Lillian. Apparently, his parents were very clear with him about how unacceptable this situation was, but Roderick did not seem willing to distance himself from her. I don't know if it's because he really loves her or because he has already lost his marriage and she is all he has left. He told them he was not going to stop seeing Lillian. Now, Roderick's family has taken a firm stance. They have officially disinherited him. They told me that they could no longer maintain a relationship with him and that they deeply regretted what I was going through. Roderick's sister informed me that the whole family had cut off all communication with both him and Lillian. She explained that even the members of the extended family, whom I don't know so well, were outraged by the whole situation. It has become the topic of family conversation at the moment because there are 2 members involved in the scandal. I guess all that's left to do is wait for the divorce to go through and leave my husband free to pursue his dream of living with his cousin like it was some kind of sick joke. Update 4. The romantic dream with his cousin has vanished from my ex-husband Roderick, along with their marriage, which is now officially over. This will be a good summary of the last few months of my life. The most important thing for me, but perhaps the most boring for you, is that the divorce is finalized and I have completely moved on from the whole situation. I have kept in touch with my ex-in-laws because they have made an effort to ask me throughout the process how I was and if I needed any help. That's why I consider them to be excellent in-laws, as they are able to recognize their son's inappropriate behavior and not automatically take a side because family is the most important thing. I hope never to meet a husband like Roderick again, but I don't know if I will ever find in-laws as good as the ones I had. It's not that common. Now, speaking of the affair with my ex's cousin, there is no longer any need to buy plane tickets to escape together. Lillian, after being rejected by her own parents, her father is the brother of Roderick's mother, also decided to end her relationship with him to avoid being excluded by her family. So far, it seems like another love story that does not prosper due to family differences. Only in this case, the differences arose within the same family due to the inappropriate nature of their relationship. But her parents were still not satisfied with that because the situation continued to make the family look bad, especially them, Lillian's parents. So what did Lillian do to distance herself further from the affair? She claimed that Roderick had manipulated her all this time. She said that he invited her on trips, like the one to Los Angeles, which were clearly a way of getting away from everyone who might know them, and then, when they were there, he would start flirting with her. She thought that these trips were just holidays with cousins, but when he started putting pressure on her, she felt obliged to reciprocate. Over time, she said, she felt trapped in this unhealthy relationship and couldn't escape, so she continued with the situation. I read this with my own eyes because it was posted on the internet until Roderick filed a defamation lawsuit and had to take it down. However, neither her parents nor I believe this lie, so Lillian only managed to face a legal lawsuit while Roderick ended up with his reputation completely ruined. The company where he worked decided to fire him, arguing that his behavior towards a woman made his female coworkers feel unsafe around him. That was the end of the game for Roderick. The issue turned out to be more serious than anyone could have imagined, considering that in our state it is illegal to marry a close relative such as a cousin. So I really don't understand what his ultimate purpose was with Lillian. Mine, for my part, is to get my life back and stay away from anyone who has romantic relationships with their own relatives. I want to thank everyone for their support during this difficult process. Your comments and advice have helped me to stand firm in my decisions. Although I still have a long way to go to fully heal, at least now I can see a future beyond this whole nightmare. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe freely and start rebuilding my life on my own terms. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I am sure of one thing: I deserve much better than what I had with Roderick. And in time, I hope to find it. In the meantime, I am focused on myself, on my well-being, and on rediscovering who I am now that the stage of my life is over.